Hey guys, welcome back to Asgard, and welcome back to Direwolf 20. So, today we are going to be doing all Draconic Evolution, all episodes, so yay! We're gonna be doing quite a bit of fun stuff. I did grind the Ender Dragon a bit. I got everything situated so that we can move on into the higher end Draconic Evolution, basically the very end of Draconic Evolution today. I also killed the two Chaos Dragons that we found last episode. After I relogged, they had come back. So I did kill both of those at those two islands and got more Chaos Shards, so we now have 15 Chaos Shards. So we are pretty well set in that regard. So, and then I also spent it was actually quite a few hours playing around with the reactors, optimizing, and, you know, I've done a little bit with the reactors in 1.10. I use them extensively in 1.7, but I did spend a bit of time optimizing and playing around with the 1.10 ones. I will say the 1.10 ones, if you want to spend the time to do so, you can actually really min-max them, if you so desire. In my test world, I have one that's, I'm not going to say it's very min-maxed, but it's fairly min-maxed. Basically, you have to kind of, in 1.10, you kind of have to throttle the reactor a bit. And we'll get into how that works and stuff a little bit later in the episode whenever we start setting up our reactors. And I'll probably take you guys over briefly to my test world and show you kind of what I've been doing over there as well. But the first thing that I want to do today is I want to upgrade this. You know, we've got this tier 7 energy core. Why don't we go ahead and make it a tier 8? You know, we talked about the tier 8 before. It takes a whole lot of Awakened Draconium. If you open up the manual here, you can see that the tier 8 still takes the energy core and the 36 energy core stabilizers, but now it no longer takes any redstone blocks. Instead, it takes 786 Draconium blocks, 378 Awakened Draconium blocks. So very, very expensive, but we do have the materials now, you know, especially once you have a Dragon Dimlet and you have Awakened Draconium automated, it's not really a big issue to get 378 of those at all. So let's go ahead and grab ourselves a bit of this Awakened Draconium. That'll be enough. And then I also want a bit of Draconium, and that should be enough. Probably more than enough, realistically, but I'm going to go ahead and throw these Draconic Flux capacitors in here, just so we have some inventory space to pick up all the redstone blocks. And we'll go ahead and just deactivate this for right now. And what I want to do is I just want to break this down. Okay, so let me go ahead. We're going to say dig AoE. I want this to be a 9x9. Okay. And we'll just go ahead and just dig down through this thing. And then we'll do the same. We're just basically going to remove everything that isn't the energy core. Okay. So all that stuff's cleaned up. And then what we need to do is, let's go ahead and set this up. We're going to say tier 8 energy core. We're going to say build guide active. And we can see that that's how it needs to look. It is one wider in each direction, you know. Because basically this Draconium is still in the same place. This outer layer of Draconium is still in the same place as our previous tier. And then it has to be coated in Awakened Draconium. But we have to change all the redstone over. Now we could have used maybe like a wand to switch it all. Just like a swapping wand. I actually didn't think about that until after the fact, though. So, that's okay. That's fine. I do hate building these out, though, because the way this works drives me absolutely insane. Okay, I believe that is everything. As far as the Draconium goes. Now we just have to coat the outside with the Awakened Draconium. Pretty much cover up all the Draconium blocks, alright? Okay, that should be everything now. So we have this huge chunk of Awakened Draconium. And underneath it we have a bunch of Draconium. Wonderful. Alright, so let's go ahead and turn this thing on. If we click on one of these stabilizers, of course we can activate it from here. So we're going to say activate. And there we go. It is on. It's running. You can see it did keep the power that was in the system from before. You will notice, I mean, the transfer rate is very, very negative right now. It's basically filling back up everything because when we had it shut off, of course, it drained everything. Applied our AE2 system and all that stuff was drained. But now it's back positive again. and filling back up with power. It did keep our power storage that we had, so that's nice. Capacity is almost infinite. You can see the number right there. That's how much RF it stores. So 19 digits of power. So a lot of power. A lot of power. Something that would take a very long time to fill up. A very, very long time. Even if you were using like mechanism or something like that and producing just an absolute ton of power, it would still take a very long time to fill this thing up. So, and if you did, then you're just crazy and there's no reason to have that much power. it's pretty much the answer there. So anyways, that is done. That is the top tier power storage, and I'm happy with it. It's beautiful. It is beautiful. Now the next thing that I want to do is I want to get into reactors. So that's what we're going to be spending the rest of the episode on. So let's go ahead and pop over here. And if we take a look here at Draconic Evolution, the first thing that we're going to want is we're going to want to get ourselves 4 reactor stabilizers. Now really these aren't too terribly expensive. We are going to need these reactor stabilizer frames. Let's go ahead and order like 10 wyvern cores. Okay, so we got our 4 wyvern cores. Actually get rid of those. And we'll get our reactor stabilizer frames. Now in addition, for the reactor stabilizer, we are also going to need chaotic cores, not cheap, and reactor stabilizer rotor assemblies and stabilizer focus rings. And keep in mind we're going to need 4 of these. So we'll go ahead and get our stabilizer focus rings. There we go, there's our focus rings. And then we're also going to need the stabilizer rotor assembly. This requires wyvern cores in addition to stabilizer outer rotors and inner rotors. These aren't terribly expensive though, honestly. The inner rotors do require awakened draconium. So, and then our rotor assembly. Go ahead and throw that stuff in there. And by the way, I hope everybody had a wonderful Mother's Day. I actually got some really good news on Mother's Day, and I was super, super excited. For those of you that don't know, my mom is in Japan, not in Japan, she's in China. And she has been for a few years now. She'll come back every once in a while to visit, but she is in China working. And I actually talked to her. That takes Draconic level. But anyways, I talked to her on Mother's Day, and wished her a good happy Mother's Day and all that. And I found out that she has decided to come back later on this year. So it'll be in August. And we can expect her to come back and all that good stuff. So it's going to be awesome. So the next step, we've got all that stuff. And, we can make this, but it does require those chaotic cores. And it takes chaotic tier. 8 chaotic tier infusion pieces. So what we're going to do is we are going to do a little bit of upgrading. Up to the chaotic fusion crafting injectors. Now these require chaotic cores, dragon eggs, diamonds. And quite a bit of power, honestly. 48 million power. That's quite a bit, considering we need 8 of these. So the first step that we're going to need to do is get some chaotic cores. These are awakened cores and awakened draconium ingots. We're going to need 4 of each for every core. So we're going to need 8 cores for the chaotic fusion crafting injector. And then we are going to need, 4 more for the stabilizers. So we're looking at 12 chaotic cores. So we actually have just enough chaos shards, pretty much. A little bit extra, but we have, it's very, very expensive, basically. So let's go ahead and order ourselves, how many did I say that I was going to need? 12? So we are going to need to get ourselves 48 awakened cores. Absolutely insane. We are out of awakened draconium. So, let me go ahead and order 4 more of those. Actually, let's get 4 more on top of that. And while we're waiting, let's go ahead and get ourselves a couple other things that we're going to need for today's build. We are going to need to get 2 flux gates. So, let's go ahead and grab these. They do require potentiometers. I have draconium dust. Okay, so now we can get our potentiometers. We're going to need 2 of these. And I'll get into exactly how the flux gates work for those of you that aren't familiar with them here in just a bit. Okay, we are going to need comparators, and then we'll grab our flux gates. I don't really need any more of that draconium. And then our awakened draconium is done. Let's go ahead and get our cores. So I said we're going to need 48 of these. Man, it's so expensive. Order them. That's going to take a while to craft 48 awakened cores. It really is. Maybe I should have ordered all this before I started this episode. Because I will have to cut in just a second while I wait for some of this stuff to craft up. But we're going to try to make our first bit of our first chaotic fusion injector before that. Alright, and the next thing that we're going to need is we're going to need 8 dragon eggs. These can be crafted actually though, using dragon hearts and awakened cores and then eggs. I'm going to craft them just because I don't want to have to go spawn the chaos or the ender dragon and kill him a bunch of times and all of that. I'm not for sure. We do have 2 dragon eggs right there. So all we're going to need is... Oh, they do require awakened cores too. Oh my gosh. Okay, so that's another 12 awakened cores that we're going to need. Okay, so for our actual chaotic core, we're going to go ahead and make one of these things, and then I'm going to make a bunch of them here in just a second. We're going to need 4 awakened cores and 4 awakened draconium. Okay, we're waiting on 1 more core. That shouldn't take... It's finishing up right now, so... And then for our actual chaotic fusion crafting injectors, it's chaotic core, dragon egg, 4 diamonds. Okay, so let me get... I'm just going to grab like a stack of diamonds. I'm not going to need that many, but... Still nice to have it, right? Okay, so there's our awakened cores and everything. And we'll pop on over here... and get this laid out real quick. So 4 awakened cores. And there is a chaos shard. That's crafting. Oh, the first chaos or chaotic core of the series. Wonderful. Those things are a pain. Once you start making these and all this stuff, well, it's nice though because now that they've included the reactor, we have a reason to get the chaotic fusion crafting injectors aside from just the armor upgrades and stuff and the weapon upgrades and all that. Even though it means we're going to be using, I mean, it's very, very expensive to straight out require, I think it's 13 chaos shards, like right out the gate. Because we are going to have to make one of these Draconic Reactor cores. Now this is actually fairly cheap, but it does require chaotic tier. Just like the stabilizers. These things. So, but anyways, we got our first chaotic core. Let's go ahead and get our first chaotic fusion crafting injector. So, I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pull off like this one right here. And we'll throw our chaotic core... dragon egg, and then all of our diamonds. And we'll go ahead and start that upgrading. This is, to me, this is like a very big moment within Draconic Evolution in 1.10. Honestly, in 1.7, I feel like the reactor was a bit easier to get into. Now it's honestly fairly expensive. It really, really is. Oh my gosh. These cores take forever. And there we go. We got our very first chaotic fusion crafting injector of 8. So we'll go ahead and just put that right there. I'm going to have to plug power up to this. So there we go. There's one of them. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to have the chaotic ones around here. And then have the orange ones in the center. I think it will look good. And I believe it gives us access to all the chaos infusion stuff. So, anyways, I'll be back. It's going to take a while, honestly. It's probably going to take close to an hour to get all this stuff crafted up. All the chaotic crafting injectors crafted, the cores, and all the wither spawning and all that fun stuff. So, anyways, I'll be back in a bit. A decent little bit. Okay, that actually took longer than intended. I had to go get more dragon hearts to make dragon eggs with because I ran out. Because we actually ended up needing 10 fusion crafting injectors. When I got to looking a little bit closer, I realized, okay, yeah, we do actually need all 10 of them. So, it's terribly expensive. It really, really is. It is a little bit cheaper now, that we've got this in place, but you are going to have 15 chaos shards to get it going. So there's no way we're going to make 2 reactors. It does actually require 15. I'm fairly certain my math is correct this time. Chaos shards. So I've only got 1 left after doing the 10 fusion crafting injectors and then the 4 reactor stabilizers. Very, very expensive stuff. Okay, so the next thing that I want to get is the reactor energy injector. This is the reason that we actually needed 10 crafting injectors, because this does have 10 different slots. It is a tier chaotic, so it does require all 10 of those slots to be chaotic. So let's go ahead and get this laid out. I mean, honestly, this block isn't terribly expensive on its own, but the crafting injectors is what causes it to be very, very expensive. Because if it wasn't for this block, we could get away with like 8 crafting injectors. And then we're going to need 2 iron. Not very often that you see iron in Draconic Evolution, honestly. But we'll get that running. And then, let's see, there's our reactor stabilizers, our flux gates. We're also going to want this Draconic Reactor core. This is just awakened Draconium. Ooh, do I have enough of that? And Draconium ingots. Oh yeah, I've got this. Okay. I can't remember how much awakened Draconium I have left. 3 pieces. So 19 pieces of awakened Draconium at the moment. And this actually requires our last Chaos Shard. So 15 Chaos Shards. You have to kill the Chaos Dragon 3 times in order to get a reactor. Then I also grabbed some of our Draconic Relay Crystals out of the AE system. We're just going to break these down into Draconic Energy IO Crystals. And then let me get my... Oh no, I've already got my Crystal Binder. Okay. And there's our Draconic Reactor Core. Yeah! And I believe that's everything that I want, I think. At least that comes to mind at the moment. I think that's everything that I want. Oh, I am going to want just some cobblestone or something. Yeah, we'll just go with cobblestone to help us kind of lay this out and build it and everything. And we're going to be putting this up in the central control area, I do believe. I have to finish doing the glass and stuff. I was trying to figure out exactly where my reactor was before I went too crazy up here. But I think what we're going to do is we're actually going to put it above our energy storage multi-block. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to bring this down. Let's see, we'll do it down by 1, and then right here I want to put a Fluix gate, and let's see, this would be, no, I need it to face the other way, so we can hold shift and reverse the placement, so it's going to point down. That would be the injector. Yeah, that's what I want. So we'll have that pointing down. On top of it, we're going to have an IO crystal right here, and we're going to change this over and say that this one is going to output from the system. So basically it's going to output power into this flux gate, and then we're going to, on the flux gate, we're going to put our reactor energy injector right here. Okay. That's a part of the reactor, and you can actually, we'll get into that in just a second. I'm just kind of getting the basic stuff laid out first. And then let's go ahead and plug this IO crystal in. This is our primary input from the system, so we'll go ahead and just connect. Yeah, we'll connect into the... Oh, it's reached its connection limit. So we can put one, you know, maybe on the side here. And then we can connect that up. Yeah. And then we'll change that one over to input. So, okay. So now that's inputting, and we should have... Yeah. This has a charge, 63.999 million within the IO crystal. That's good to see. And then what we need to do is from this reactor stabilizer, we're going to come down 5 blocks. 3, 4, 5. Now you can do up to 8 blocks away if you so desire, if you need the space or something like that. You can do as far away as 8 blocks. But I wouldn't suggest you do any less than 5. And the reason is you can actually do it just like 1 block away. But the thing is, as the reactor, after you add fuel and the reactor starts to actually grow, you know, the energy containment field grows, it can actually eat blocks. So if you put your crafting injectors too close, or your reactor stabilizers too close, or even if you put just a piece of cobblestone too close to the reactor, it will eat those blocks. And if it eats like its stabilizers or the injector or something like that, it is going to cause the reactor to malfunction and explode, because it's no longer stabilized, it's no longer receiving power, and you know, bad things happen, of course, when Draconic Evolution reactors explode. If you guys did not know, really bad things do happen. So I would not suggest that. Whenever you set this up, do be careful, because it will literally annihilate your entire base. I know a lot of people prefer to build them in other dimensions. I actually considered that, but I was like, we're living on the edge, right? So we're building it here. And I mean, if you build them correctly and safely, you'll be fine. Just make sure you know what you're doing before you set this up. But we're going to put our reactor core here, 5 blocks down, 5 blocks between the reactor core and the injector. Okay, and we'll just go ahead and break those off. And then what we're going to do is we're going to build out 5 blocks in each direction from the reactor core. Just like that. And here's where we're going to put our reactor stabilizers. And we can just right click those on, they face the right direction. And there we go. That's the majority of the reactor now set up. Okay. So now if we click on our reactor stabilizer, you can see it says status offline. That's a good sign. When it says status offline, that means it is a reactor. You know, it recognizes the multi-block structure. It says, okay, you've got the injector, you've got the 4 stabilizers. They're in the right place. Offline just means that it's not currently running. It's not currently trying to warm up or run or do anything. It's just sitting there. Now, the next thing that we're going to need, and I don't have enough of, is we are going to need some awakened draconium blocks. I only have 1. So let me, and I know I don't have any dragon hearts left, so let me pop over to our, actually, you know what? Before I do that, I should probably go turn the dimension on, right? So to the dragon dimension, I just need a couple dragon hearts, honestly. Alright, so we got our 3, I actually got 3 dragon hearts. I only needed 2. 8 blocks of awakened draconium is actually the maximum that you can utilize. But we're going to go ahead and just order 12 blocks of awakened draconium. And now while that's running, let's go ahead and set up our next, while we're waiting on those that awakened draconium, let's go ahead and set up our next flux gate. And what we're going to do is we're going to set this one up. I guess it doesn't really matter, but there's our power connection line. So I'm just going to plug it up right here. And I think, let's see, we want the power to come out. Shift right click. There we go. The arrow pointing away, that's good. That means it's pulling power from this. This is inserting power into this. Okay, and there's also orange and blue sides. Orange is output, blue is input. But basically this one we want it pulling power from the reactor stabilizer into the flux gate, and then we're going to put another IO crystal right here. We're going to say that this one is going to input, and then we're just going to connect this up to this one. Okay, so it's basically going to pull power from the reactor, dump it into here, and then any power that's needed is going to be pulled from this and sent up to the reactor. So I would suggest that you have a middleman. Don't pump the power from this to that. Send it through to the storage and then send it back through. It honestly makes things just run better and work better in my experience. Okay, now we're mainly just waiting on the awakened draconium. Let's talk just briefly about flux gates. The way these work is you can actually right click on these. You can set different settings for whenever it has a redstone signal, when it doesn't have a redstone signal, and you can set how much RF per tick is able to transfer through this gate. So the flux gate basically limits RF transfer, because the thing is, you don't want to not have a flux gate, especially with your crafting injector. Well, really for both of them. And we'll get into more detail here shortly on why that is, but basically you need to pump power a specific amount of power into the reactor to balance out and create basically the energy field that holds the, all the energy, all the swirling reactor energy within the reactor. And you also need to limit your energy output from the reactor, because if you pull too much energy out, it's going to weaken the reaction. It's going to explode. So you do need to limit incoming and outgoing RF with the reactor. It's very, very particular. So you need to be careful, because when this thing explodes, when you do something wrong and it explodes, it's not fun. Especially if you didn't mean for it to happen. Like, if you thought any other reactor was big, yeah, you haven't seen anything until you've blown up a Draconic Evolution reactor. So this first flux gate, we're going to limit the amount of power that gets transferred into the reaction. So what we're going to do is we are going to, I'm not going to worry, in the past in 1.7 I set up a system so that it changed based on how much energy was in the system and toggled it on and off. But since we have this nifty new power storage that's just pretty much infinite, I just want this running full blast all the time. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're just going to set it to redstone signal low. We're not going to worry about the redstone signal high, because we're not going to give this a redstone signal. So what we're going to do is we are going to set the redstone signal low to, let's say, 124, we'll say 126,000 RF per tick. Okay, now we will throttle that down a bit, and long term we're only going to be putting in about 124,000, maybe even less, power into this. But for right now, we're going to start with 126, because the thing is, with the Draconic Evolution reactors, if you want to min-max your reactor, you can't min-max it from the start. That's very, very important, and I'll show you in the test world later on in this episode why that is. Just briefly go over that. But I can't just give you a magic number to put in here and say, that's the best, here you go, put that in there and you win. Because if you put the best min-max settings that you can get on a reactor, and you put that in from a cold start, like basically it warms up and you hit start and you already have those settings in there, you're going to blow up the reactor. Basically you have, because the reactor, it takes time to basically settle. So if we take a look at the GUI here, you can see that there's settings for containment field strength and core temperature and energy saturation. Especially these two. These are going to take time to basically level out. So whenever you activate it, you're going to see the containment field strength start to drop. You're going to see the core temperature start to rise, and stuff's going to be going all over the place. And that stuff's not going to be fully settled for quite a while. It honestly takes a very long time to min-max your reactor. I spent a few hours doing it, because any kind of adjustment and stuff that you do, it takes a fair few minutes, like 5 or 6 minutes, to really level back out. And then you can look at your settings and your temperature and your containment field, as well as there's a couple other settings which we'll go over. I'm not going to go over this GUI in detail until we actually start the reactor, because there's actually more information that's going to show up. But for starting your reactor, 126,000, that's safe. So that's what we're going to go with. And now this flux gate, we are going to adjust how much power is actually pulled out of the reactor. Okay, so like I said before, you can't pull out too much power or you will blow it up. So do be careful. We are going to actually, let's see, starting out, let's go with 530,000 RF. Okay, so 530,000 RF per tick is going to be pulled out of the reactor. We'll go ahead and hit save. And yeah, that's pretty much that. Let's go ahead and get our awakened draconium blocks now. And I want to put these into the fuel slot. So we'll take our 8 awakened draconium blocks, put it into the fuel in. Now you can actually do less. You could do like 1 awakened draconium or 3 or whatever. I wouldn't suggest it, because the only time that you can add or remove fuel from a Draconic Reactor is when it's turned off. So with Draconic Evolution, there's no attaching an item conduit to it and pumping, fuel in and pulling out chaos and stuff like that. You can't do that. with Draconic Evolution. But luckily, these reactors run for an extremely long time without having to be refilled. That's actually right here, this fuel conversion level. You can see, like if I was to, for example, put just 4 Awakened Draconium, you can see that it has 5,184, okay? And then if I put 8 in there, it has 10,368. Now, I will say that it takes a very long time just to get 0.1% of your fuel burn up. The percent there is how much fuel out of that total has been burned, okay? And it's going to go up extremely slow. Like, we probably, through the rest of the series, we probably will not have to refuel it because it does run for a very, very long time. So anyways, we put our fuel in. Let's go ahead and hit charge. And you can hear it start to activate. You can see some fancy lights coming out. It does look extremely cool. I love the new 1.10 changes to the reactor. It's excellent. It looks amazing. It's so much better than it used to be. Though I will say, I mean, it looked fine for 1.7, but it looks even better now. So, especially once we get it running and have some fun with it. So right now it says it's warming up. We are going to have to give it some time. First up, it raises the containment field strength up to 50%. It's already done that. It tends to do that fairly quickly depending on how much power that you're inserting into it. Now over here you can see energy saturation. That's building up. That's going to have to build up to 50% as well. Now you can actually speed this up. So for example, if I set this to, let's add just one more 0 to this. Okay, so now if we take a look, you can see that the saturation is building up even faster. Because basically what's happening is it's having to pump in energy into the reactor to get it ready to start. So it's not free to start. You can't just hit start and it goes. You do have to give it some energy and help it along. Okay, so now that saturation is built up, now it's sending energy in to raise that core temperature up. Okay, so there we go. It's already at 2,000 degrees Celsius, actually 2006, probably because of the amount of power that we were pumping in. So let me go ahead, remove one of those zeros. And now we are actually ready to start this thing. Oh, it's always scary. So I'm going to launch a manual backup just to make sure. So now I'd say we're ready to go. Now there's a couple different settings here. You can set redstone mode. It allows you to configure the comparator output for this reactor component. You can say, you know, emit a signal when the temperature rises up to 10,000. Then you can have the temperature inverted. You can have it based on the shield, the containment field. You can have it based on the saturation, and you can have it based on the conversion. So basically any of these, if you want to play around with the redstone or have the reactor do different things based on the redstone, you can do it with that. I'm not going to be doing any of that today. There's also a failsafe. So basically if the temperature drops below 2,500 degrees Celsius, saturation reaches 99%, it'll automatically shut down your reactor. So, and yeah, we're all set. It's warmed up, it's ready to go. Once these are done, I mean, you can hit activate at any time after that point. So let's go ahead and start this thing up. And you're going to notice pretty quickly the temperature is rising at a fairly quick rate. The containment field strength is dropping. The energy saturation is dropping. And fuel conversion is slowly going up. That, honestly, this bar, you're not going to see this move for a while. So, not something that you really have to keep an eye on. But these other 3 bars are a bit more important. I will say the 2 on the left here are the most important. And I'm going to take a little bit of time here and talk about everything within the GUI here. Just so, for those of you that aren't familiar with it, it is very, very similar to 1.7. So if you're familiar with that reactor, you probably already know how this works. But first up, the temperature, core temperature, is the amount of heat within the reactor, right? I mean, that's pretty self-explanatory. If your reactor falls below 2,000 degrees Celsius, it will shut down. Basically, it's not hot enough at that temperature to sustain a reaction within the reactor. Because, of course, with a reactor, what's generating the power is that nuclear reaction within the reactor, right? So once the temperature goes too low, that nuclear reaction settles down, it's not reacting anymore, and it's not running, it's not producing power. Okay, that's just, I mean, that's how it works in real life, that's how it works on here. Of course, we don't have reactors like this, but pretty self-explanatory on that. Also, if your reactor gets too high, if it gets too hot, there's a chance that it will explode. So just be aware of that. The sweet spot with Draconic Evolution to balance out your fuel burn-up rate with how much power you're producing and all that stuff, the sweet spot is you want to get it around 8,000 degrees Celsius. 8,000 being prime. Okay, anything above 8,000, you're going to start burning up more fuel, wasting more fuel, which, I mean, if you have a lot of awakened draconium, it's not a big deal, but the only thing is then you have to start the reactor again and all that stuff. You have to keep an eye on it. Personally, I like trying to keep it around 8,000. And that's what we'll be doing today. And with core temperature and with everything within this reactor, everything's kind of linked together. So I'll talk about the way that these bars are linked and how they impact each other and stuff like that in just a second. Containment field strength is how much of a containment field you have around the reactor. Okay. Basically, there is no minimum to this other than 0. If it reaches 0, it will start to explode. Okay. So you can technically, I had a reactor earlier today and then I tweaked it and it exploded on me, but in my test world. But I had a reactor today that was running fine at 0.5% containment field strength. So it didn't even have a full percent, and it was running fine. You don't have to have that at max. The lower your containment field strength, honestly, the better. Because your containment field strength, the reason that number goes up is because you're pumping more power through the injector. You're pumping more power into that. So basically you're using up more power to run the reactor, right? So I like to keep it low. The only thing is, be careful about putting it too low, because if you make any kind of adjustments to the amount of power that outputs, it can change the amount of power required to contain it, because we'll talk about that in just a second, how everything's linked. But basically just keep in mind that any kind of adjustments with temperature and stuff like that can and will affect the containment field strength, how much energy is actually needed to contain it. And so if you start tweaking it and you're not careful, your reactor can explode, because it can say, well, you know, the amount of power you were giving me for the containment field was fine a second ago, but now you just switched that. You changed how much power you're pulling out to a higher number, and now I need more to sustain this reaction. So hopefully that makes sense. Next up we have energy saturation. Basically this is power within the reactor. It has 1 billion power storage within the reactor, and it does require some energy in here. So do not set your export from the reactor too high, or it'll pull all the energy out and this will explode. So usually I like to keep it down here. It's usually around 10-11%, because you can see right now there's 128,000 127,000, you know, it's steadily dropping, but it's going to correspond to how much we're inputting. Okay, so with my reactor I want to basically pull out most all of the power that I'm creating and input it myself and say, okay, this is the power I'm allocating to you to use for your containment field. Okay, and then of course fuel conversion, like I said, that's just how much burn up has occurred with our fuel. And you can see down here the fuel conversion rate. We are burning 875 nanobuckets per tick. So it's very, very slow. It takes a while to burn through all the awakened draconium. You can see that so far we've only burnt through 0.06%. Okay, so a long ways to go. Now, these three things here, core volume, you don't have to worry about. This just tells you how much matter is in the reactor. It's a combination of the awakened draconium that you put in and how much chaos has been created. Chaos is created whenever draconium's burnt up. So after a reactor runs, you'll see some chaos that's built up within the reactor, and it's basically just an output of it. Okay, that's not really an important number. You don't have to pay attention to this. It's not going to change. It's only going to change whenever you change fuel. You know, basically if you were to pull the 8 fuel out, you added 4 fuel instead, it would have a different core volume. That's all it is. Okay, generation rate. This is how much power is being generated by the reactor. Pretty self-explanatory. This number is very important because it kind of lets you, for one, it lets you see how much power you're currently generating, and it lets you gauge, how much you want to pull out and things like that. Okay, so right now we're pulling out 530,000 per tick, right? So we're not actually generating enough power to sustain that. That's why our energy saturation is dropping. But here in just a moment, we're going to hit 530,000 RF per tick, and you'll actually see the energy saturation start to rise slowly. Okay, and then you have the field input rate. This is, you can see there on the tooltip, it's the exact amount of RF. If we wanted to keep our containment field strength at that number right there, that's going to tell you, you're basically, if I wanted to keep it at 4,470 something thousand, and that percentage on the containment field, the field input is going to say, you need to input 126,260 whatever RF per tick into the system through this, if you wanted to sustain that. Now the only thing is both of these numbers are going to change as your reactor runs. They're going to move back and forth because they are directly influenced by this bar, and this bar. Okay, so let's talk about the way these bars are linked. Okay, basically the way the reactor runs is it's going to run hotter anytime that it pulls out power beyond its threshold. Okay, so actually we just hit 530,000 generation rate, so you can see they are now at the energy saturation. That's starting to go up now. Okay, now as the energy saturation goes up, this temperature is going to steadily drop. So if we wait just a second, there we go, it just dropped by 0.1 degrees Celsius. Now as that core temperature drops, the containment field strength is going to probably increase, because the cooler the Draconic Reactor is, the less the containment field has to work to keep it, contained, I guess. So basically what you're going to see as your reactor is running is you're going to see your saturation whenever once everything settles out, you're going to see that your saturation starts going up. Okay, because your reactor is always going to balance out, and like we're pulling out 530,000 per tick right now. Okay, it's actually producing more power now than what we are pulling out, and that's standard. That's how it's going to happen, no matter what you really do, unless things are really bad. Once things balance out, it's going to be producing a little bit more power than what you're pulling out, and that's due to different factors like the temperature and stuff like that. That adjusts how much RF you're producing. So it's going to produce more power. The energy saturation is going to steadily rise. And as the energy saturation rises, the temperature cools down. The containment field strength goes up. But then after a little bit, the RF generation is going to drop because the temperature has dropped. The RF generation is based on the temperature, so the hotter the reactor is, the more RF it's going to produce. So what's going to happen is, after a while, that core temperature is going to get so low that your generation rate then drops below what you're pulling out. And then the reactor is going to say, okay, I'm not producing enough to sustain that because the saturation starts to drop. And as the saturation drops, the temperature then goes back up and produces more. So after a fairly long while, things will actually balance out, and it's going to sit right around specific numbers. But like I said, it does take a very long time for this to really get balanced out and for you to get an accurate read on what you're producing and your actual counts and stuff. I mean, you can see here the core temperature is still dropping, saturation is still going up. So basically we're still waiting for this to balance out. And so earlier, whenever I said that you have to kind of throttle your reactor if you want to min-max it, this is what I meant, okay? Because like right now, my containment field strength is at a 4.44%, and it's going up. Saturation's going up, temperature's going down. Temperature's fairly cool. It's 170 degrees right now, below par. So I can actually boost this up if I wanted to, and I'm going to in just a second. But you don't want to set those numbers from the get-go because, if you noticed, our heat actually got up a decent amount. And if I was to say from the beginning, okay, I want you to pull out 550,000 RF per tick, I want the containment field to only receive, what do I have it set at right now? 126. In my test world, I actually got it down to 122,000. So if I was to set it at 122,000, set it to pull out, let's say, 555,000 from the get-go, while it was heating up, it would just get too hot and it would explode. So you kind of have to let it balance out a little bit. You don't have to wait for it to full balance, but you do have to wait for a bit and kind of let it just kind of get a little bit balanced out. And now that the containment field's setting pretty steady, the temperature's, you know, steadily going down, our energy saturation's going up, what we can do then is we can come over here and let's say, now I want you to pull out 540,000 per tick. Okay, so now if we take a look here, you're going to see that the containment or the temperature is going to start going up pretty steadily as the generation rate goes up. And like I mentioned before, this generation rate is going to go up. It's going to go to about 540,500-ish or something like that. Now, while it's doing that, the entire time that this generation rate is below what you're pulling out, the temperature is going to rise. Because basically the way that the reactor works is it says, you know, I'm not producing enough power to meet what you want to pull out of this, so I'm going to raise the temperature and raise the temperature and raise the temperature until I'm generating enough to make you happy. Okay? Hopefully that makes sense. That's basically how the reactor's programmed to work. Okay? So right now it's already up to 535,000 generation. You can see the containment field is dropping steadily. We're at 4.1% right now. And the temperature's going up. It's probably going to break 8,000. Realistically, it's probably going to end up getting around 8,200, I'm thinking. That's about what it hit last time when I was testing it. Because I was kind of testing what numbers I like to start with, what numbers I feel safe starting with. I would suggest you start with the 500 or the 530,000 to start, and then bump it up to 540,000. Now, after 540,000, I wouldn't suggest you go straight to 50,000. I would suggest like 545,000 or something like that, because the more you min-max, the tighter things become, and you kind of have to tweak it in smaller amounts. Okay, so just to be on the safe side, I would make smaller adjustments to it the higher you go. Because earlier I made like an adjustment, I had it really tweaked and really fine-tuned. I made an adjustment of like 500 RF per tick and blew it up. So I was trying to get like the exact numbers just right. And like I said, I mean, it takes hours tweaking these things and getting them just right. But honestly, I mean, this will keep happening and you can really get a lot of power out of your reactor. I mean, what I did right there, whenever I bumped up this from 530,000 to 540,000, that's a 10,000 RF per tick difference. And I mean, that's straight up 10,000 gain. I mean, there's no loss. It's not like I have to increase the amount that the energy shield is getting. So, I mean, it's straight up, that's going right down into this, an extra 10,000. So you can see, I mean, right now we've got 442,000 positive RF per tick coming in. So, and the majority of it, after all that power storage, all the big reactors, everything like that, the majority of it is coming from this Draconic Reactor. So, but once the core temperature drops, it's going to go back down below 8,000, and this containment field will jump to about, if I recall correctly, it's around 3.8-ish or something like that % at these current settings. Now, I will say that we can actually reduce this. Like, this can be reduced, because like I said before, I had it earlier, I had it down to 122,000, and it still had room to kind of get adjusted. Now, I will say that this orb here, the visual effect on it is different based on how strong your containment field is. Mine is orange and looks like a nuclear bomb is about to go off because I have very little containment field strength. Okay, but if you have a lot of containment field, it's going to have like basically like an aura around it, and you can actually see the containment field. It's really neat how it works and how the visual effects on it work and everything. Right now the temperature is dropping. You can see the generation has went above what we're pulling out. Saturation's going up. Right now the containment field strength is still dropping. That's going to taper off as the temperature goes down. You can see the fuel input rate, or the field input rate. Right now it's requiring about 126,170 RF per tick, but it's steadily going down, and we're feeding at 126,000. So before long it's going to hit 126,000, and it won't, it's not going to get the containment field down to 0, so we're going to be fine. It's not going to explode on us. It's just going to take a little while to kind of normalize out again. And there we go. See, containment field is now going up because it has passed that threshold. So now, I mean, once the stuff normalizes, once the temperature gets down and everything, we can start bumping it up towards 550,000 and then 555,000 and so on. Okay. Basically, that's how the reactor works. If you guys have any questions, as always, do let me know. I'm going to pop over to the test world really quick and show you a couple things over there. So I will be right back. Okay, this is my test world. A lot of my original test stuff got blown up, actually. So as you can see, I mean, it's a massive crater that it creates. But if we take a look here, you can see that we're producing positive 432,000 RF per tick. Now keep in mind that is not including the 124,000 that I'm feeding into this reactor. Okay, this one here, it's producing 556,000 RF per tick. We're inputting about 124,000, and you can see the containment field strength is around getting close to 2%. I've been tweaking it. Like I said, I mean, it takes hours, and then all of a sudden you'll tweak it a little bit too much and it'll explode, so then you gotta start all over again. So it does take a while kind of min-maxing these and playing with them and stuff like that. But like I said, I mean, you can kind of just throttle those reactors and you can eventually min-max them quite a bit. This one right now, we are currently pulling out 556,000 RF per tick with this one. Now I will say that I had a better one before that was around altogether, I can't remember exactly what I was pulling out, but it was producing positive 442,000, and then I tweaked it a little bit too much and it exploded. So there's still a bit more RF. It just depends on how much you want to play with it. Just the only thing to keep in mind is when the fuel does run out, you're going to have to throttle it all over again. And like I said, it does take a while, but it's something that you can passively do because you can make some adjustments, leave, go do something else, come back, make some more adjustments, leave, do some other stuff. It's not something that you actively have to stand and watch. So there's really not too much issue with doing it. But I mean, if you look at this one, for example, this one's producing already, actually if you count the reduction in the what the containment field is feeding it, it's producing like 30,000 RF per tick more than the reactor we started with in our Direwolf series. So I mean, with a little bit of tweaking, you can get a lot more output out of your reactors. I don't know if I would push it to, I don't plan on min-maxing it, to the fact I've got to get every last drop of RF. But for big jumps like 30,000 RF per tick, I mean, that's a sizable difference. It's worth making those minor adjustments and throttling the reactor a bit more, once it reaches that point, once everything levels out. So I also have another reactor over here that I was messing with, but this one is more of like a cold start type reactor. It's setting right now at, yeah, that was the one I was cold starting right before the episode. So just to make sure that everything ran good and I could set it up on during the series and everything, or during the episode. So but anyways, with that, I am going to end out this episode here. If you guys have any questions, do let me know and I'll do my best to answer those for you. It'll probably be in the next day or two. I should be releasing a video actually covering just the reactors. So if you forget some of the information or you want to come back to it, there should be just a short tutorial video. It'll still be fairly in-depth, but it's mainly just going to cover how throttling works and ideal settings for starting a reactor, stuff like that, and kind of showing what you can do when you min-max it, because that's kind of what I'm playing around with here. So But I mean, like I said, it's going to be a couple days on that. But if you guys have any specific questions that I didn't answer, I tried to be as thorough as I could, because especially when you start messing with Draconic Reactors, these are very particular. And if you set it up wrong, of course, boom, and you end up with this humongous crater. It's like 500 blocks wide. I mean, it's seriously, it's huge. Okay, so if you guys have any questions or anything, do let me know. Be sure and let me know, and I will get those answered for you as best I can. And if there's something I didn't explain enough, let me know. But like I said, I try to be pretty thorough, because this stuff is very particular. So, still flying here, by the way. I mean, it goes from like, I think it goes from like here to like right out here or something like that. I mean, it's a huge area. So if it's anywhere near your base is gone if it explodes. So, but anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the episode. I hope you found it helpful. These reactors are pretty much the same in concept as 1.7, but the design aspect's a little bit different, and there are some nice changes. So, but yeah. So anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, as always, be sure and hit that like button, and go ahead and subscribe if you're not already for more daily videos. And like I said, be sure and let me know if you guys have any questions, and I'll get those answered for you. I've honestly, that's why I didn't get a whole lot of building done in the Direwolf pack, was because I literally spent hours in here just playing with reactors. Like I said, I'd played with them before, but I hadn't actually like sat down and done math work with them and all that stuff. So I know this episode was a lot of talking, so hope you guys don't mind. It's just going over all that little odd and end stuff, or the reactors and everything. So anyways, until next time, as always, do take care and stay safe, and I will see you guys then.